Welcome to Cycling Demystified, brought to you by Foundation Bike Fit and Frequency Cycle Works, the podcast where we help you take your cycling to the next level by sharing the knowledge from experienced bike fitters, mechanics, and the hidden players within the bike industry.
All right, welcome back to the podcast with me, Wei, and
Matt. No F today.
Oh,
He's here. He's in the background.
Still fettling, talking to bikes, talking to wheels,
Talking to wheels.
tinkering.
Answering back.
Yeah. Anyway, so welcome back, and today we're going to talk about leg length differences.
This is a can of worms, isn't it?
Oh, in the context of bike fitting. What do we do about it? Do we need to do anything about it? How to test if you've got a leg length difference? Why does it matter? All the important life questions that we like to answer on this podcast. Certainly in the context of bike fitting. And I think this is this is a big one, because this is one of those things that people just come and ask us about. Oh, I think I'm wonky. I think I've got one leg longer than the other. What can I do about it?
Well, I hate to break it to you. Yes, you are wonky.
Yeah.
Everyone's wonky.
Everyone's wonky. You heard it here.
Newsflash.
But we'll get on to why that is. But yeah, we thought we'd try and break down what leg length difference is, why we should care about it. And this is all part of this mini series that we're recording about foot optimization, shoe optimization, and I guess this leg length difference falls into this category because where we tend to, air quotes, correct for it is through the foot pedal shoe interface, usually, or not.
Well, there's one instance that we can recall where it certainly wasn't done at that end of the bike.
Yeah.
Well, it was that end of the bike, but not how you would think.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, just even through the bike fits that we've done today, there were some had leg length differences, some didn't, and yeah, it's always a tricky one to kind of navigate unless you're, well, it's just a tricky one to navigate. But hopefully some of this will kind of break it down a little bit. Usually, though, before we get into it, I would suggest that this is something that you would, if you're keen on exploring leg length corrections, then I would seek out a reputable bike fitter to help you through this kind of process, because it can get into the weeds quite quickly, and
it can get messy. Basically.
Yeah, and certainly you need a second opinion, a different eye, or some kind of measurement to kind of see if the results are positive or negative, see what happens. And also, we should probably say that we're not physios.
We are medically trained.
Bike fitters, so none of this information constitutes as medical information.
Correct.
And if you're unsure about any of this, please consult a practitioner of any kind. But hopefully this will be helpful. See what happens. So let's talk about leg length difference. What is it? Why should we care?
Well, I want to start with why should we care?
Why should we care? All right, let's do it.
Because the bike does not care. That's why we should care. So the bike, for the most part, is a symmetrical object. You as a human are not. And when these two worlds collide, as we know, the bike is 50% of the system, the body is the other half.
Who invented this bike thing anyway?
It is a wonderful invention, yet can be a fickle beast. But we care because the bike is symmetrical for the most part on both sides.
Yeah.
And if you are not, as a human, and chances are you are not, then this can become a potential problem by doing the repetitive active cycling and pedaling over and over and over again. So this is why we care, or we potentially care. Sometimes it doesn't matter because the body can accommodate. And most people do have a leg length discrepancy of some sort, whether it's functional or, you know, you have one bone that's longer than another on one side, structural, whether it's kind of, lateral at the pelvis, or, whether you've got, one tibia longer than another. There's loads of things that can constitute as a leg length difference.
Yeah.
But essentially, the reason we care is because you are doing a symmetrical activity, a symmetrical repetitive activity that requires a level of symmetry in your body.
And I think it probably matters more to cyclists who are attached to their bikes, or are riding a discipline that requires a more extreme kind of body position. So I'm thinking time trialists, triathletes, anything that kind of folds you into more of an unnatural position, a position or body posture which is further from your natural upright, standing, walking kind of posture. So bikes are weird because they fold you in half, essentially. But say if we look at a mountain biker with flat pedals where you're not clipped in, with a more upright riding position, wide bars, and a more upright riding position, compared with someone who's riding on the track in an aero position, trying to squeeze himself into the smallest space possible, clipped in shoes, locked into the aero bars with arm pads, then that kind of locked in position leaves a lot less room for error, as it were, or will exacerbate any asymmetries in your body far more than a more fluid position where you can move your feet around, move your hands around, move your shoulders around, move your bum around a bit more.
So it'd be fair to say the more postural stress you're under and the less movement options you have, the more this matters.
Yeah. And so you just have to be more acutely aware of your particular body, how it functions, and what it likes, what it doesn't like, so that you can get the best out of your performance in your chosen discipline.
So what can leg length difference, how can we sort of start to self-diagnose? What are the potential signs to look out for in terms of any pains, discomforts, things on the bike that might suggest exploring potential leg length difference?
Yeah. So I think I'm going to start by going back to what you were saying about us all being wonky as human beings. So, and it's true. If you don't believe us, think about your handedness. Are you right-handed? Are you left-handed? Footedness, if you had to kick a football, would you kick with your right foot or your left foot? And everyone has a preference. No matter how, air quotes, ambidextrous you are, you will have a preference from one side to the other. And this occurs throughout the whole of your body. So whether it's handedness, footedness, you even have a dominant eye. So you have two eyes, but you use the vision from one as the primary kind of sensory output. And even within your body itself, like if you look at your internal organs and how it's organized, they are not symmetrically kind of layered throughout your body. Your heart is over to one side and your liver is over to the other side. And you usually have one lung, which is like a little bit bigger than the other. So have a look at yourself in the mirror. It's kind of weird staring at yourself, but you will notice that each side of your face is not perfectly symmetrical. Even though you do have two sides of your body, two arms, two legs, and so on, you are not symmetrical, but the bike is. And so bike riding does favor symmetry of motion. Otherwise, all those asymmetries will become, again, exacerbated, or you will begin to notice them. And generally speaking, excessive asymmetry or asymmetrical movement on the bike for a prolonged period will result in asymmetric compensations, movement patterns, muscle recruitment, all the rest of it. Your body will just get on with it. But if we go too far out of balance, if we go too far into that asymmetry, if we get too far away from our center, then that's where we kind of run into issues normally. So, and this happens in other sports too. If you think about like tennis players or rowers or baseball players who are using kind of just one side of their body all the time.
Golf, that's the
golf,
one that springs to mind.
Yeah. Like all those kind of single-sided sports put pressure on your body in a particular kind of way. And so, cycling is no different, except that it is something that kind of favors symmetry of movement and or highlight those kind of asymmetries. So you are normal to be wonky, and that's really important, because quite often we'll highlight air quotes wonkiness to riders who come through the studio, and they get really they get a little bit taken aback or think it's strange and it's something that's wrong with them. There's nothing wrong with it. It's just making you aware of kind of how you function and your relationship to the bike. So that's why we care. How do we diagnose, or what would we feel if we were a little bit wonky on the bike? Well, it can manifest in so many different ways, but if we think about it just from, let's say, from the waist down, since we're talking about leg length difference, then have a think about how you're pedaling, how your feet feel as you're going through the pedal stroke, how your knees feel, how your legs feel, which muscles are working, does one leg feel like it's extending a little bit more than the other? Does one foot feel further forward than another? Are you toeing down more or heel up with one foot over the other? Do you feel like you're sitting on the saddle in the same way on both sides? Are you sitting equally, or maybe you're sitting more over to one side of the saddle or the other, or maybe you're twisting forward on the saddle, or are you rubbing your inner thigh on the nose of one side of the saddle, or maybe the top tube of the bike if it's quite an extreme twist through your hips. And that does extend up to your upper body too, but it just gets more complicated the further away you get. So, you may find that one hand always feels like it's sat further forward than the other on the hoods, and your shoulder, and one shoulder might be higher or lower. So these asymmetries run throughout the body, but if we're thinking about leg length difference in particular, usually it's something in the pedal stroke that we can feel.
Or here.
Or here, yeah, very much so. Is your pedal stroke symmetrical? Does it sound rhythmical, or does it sound arrhythmic? Are you able to control the pedal stroke better on one side than the other? Some of that might just be just muscle recruitment, like one leg maybe just more coordinated than the other, but it could also be that you have some kind of asymmetry in your body. Whew, that was quite long.
Saddle sores on one side, persistent saddle sores as well on one side of your pelvis, usually a good indicator that something's not quite as symmetrical as maybe it could be.
But the difficult thing about all of these symptoms is that they could be symptoms of everything else that could be, an issue with your bike fit. Because very rarely do we get symmetrical or bilateral symptoms. Like, it's very rare that both knees will hurt in the same place at the same time on the bike. It's very rare that you'll get, the same shoulder pain on both sides. Like, the body just doesn't really work that way. Usually what will happen is when something's not quite right with your bike fit, then the body will always default to a predetermined dominant side. It will try and preserve that kind of dominant side, and if you're right-handed, usually that is your right-hand side of your body, and so it will try everything it can do to preserve the movement and function of that kind of dominant side to the detriment of the other side. And so you'll, like, I don't know, just in real general terms, like if you're a right-handed person, your fit's a little bit off, and you say lean into your right-hand side a little bit more to kind of protect the right-hand side, then you'll probably find that you get left knee pain, for example. And so, most left knee pain is because of, not because there's an issue with the left knee, but actually an issue with like relying on the right-hand side.
Rarely is the acute symptom the root cause.
Yeah.
Basically.
So, again, if you've gone to a bike fit, then most bike fitters will check for some structural leg length difference. And actually, maybe let's rewind it. Let's talk about like kind of actual leg length differences rather than asymmetry. So far we've been talking about like kind of how your body can move asymmetrically because of a suboptimal bike fit, something your body will kind of move to compensate. However, your body itself may be asymmetric in its structure. So we try to differentiate between a structural kind of leg length difference and a functional leg length difference, and it's really important that we understand the differences. So a structural leg length difference will be where, if, say, as bike fitters, we observe that it looks like one leg is longer than the other, and we have to try and determine if this is because you've literally got one bone or a bone or several bones in your skeletal system, which is longer than the other side. So if your femur, your thigh bone, is longer on your left than it is the right, then it will produce a structural leg length difference. A functional leg length difference will be, again, if we observe a difference in kind of length in your legs, but it's because of a shift in your posture or how your skeletal system is aligned. So the most common will be a shift in your hips. Your hips will be kind of more dropped on one side or rotated on one side, and that will effectively make one leg longer and one leg shorter. So the side which is kind of rotated forward and dropped will have effectively a longer leg, and the side of the hip which is kind of hiked up and rotated back will appear slightly shorter. So we have to make that distinction in order to decide what to do about a leg length difference, if anything at all. So this is, if you want to kind of explore this is something that you need to see if you can determine. Like even for kind of medical practitioners, it's quite difficult to determine kind of structural differences and so on. Like the recommended short fast way is to get an X-ray, but even that kind of like measuring that will be kind of like difficult. But we can usually see by kind of manipulating the pelvis a little bit and just moving the body around whether or not anything changes within the layout of kind of how your body kind of sits, and that will help us determine whether or not you really have a structural difference or not. In the studio, we kind of get people lying down and we go through a set of movements to kind of have a look at how people and their hips and their legs kind of align, and we can usually determine pretty quickly whether or not something is more functional or more structural. If you're at home, I think one of the easiest way, if you don't have someone else to kind of look at your legs, like if you've got a friend, then you can just kind of lie down on the floor on your back as long as possible, nice and relaxed, and you get your friend to put your ankles together and just compare like kind of where the ankle bones are in relationship to each other, and where your heels rest. If you say you pointed your toes up towards the ceiling, so your feet are kind of pointing straight upwards, you look to the heel distance, you can kind of see pretty quickly whether or not there is a difference or not. If you don't have a friend, one way
You got no mates.
One way you could do it is sometimes if you can take a picture, you can set up a camera, and then you lie down on the floor next to a wall and put your feet up the wall. So you'll have your bum against the wall, your legs straight up the wall, but with your back horizontal.
You're basically creating a right angle.
Yeah, a right angle.
Yeah.
And then if you can take a picture of where your feet are at that point, you can usually see if like one foot is a little bit higher than the other, or one heel is higher than the other or not, and that might tell you whether or not you have a leg length difference. But you can also sometimes feel it to your hips, you know, where is it sitting? Also your knees, like are your knees in line with each other, and so on. So there's a few different ways, like to kind of try and figure that kind of stuff out. But you know, I would usually recommend at least go to a physio or a practitioner who kind of deals with bodies on a daily basis to kind of look at you and to diagnose that. But essentially, going back to what we were saying before, there is a difference between a structural kind of bony leg length difference and then a functional kind of leg length difference, which is just kind of dependent on how your pelvis is sitting usually. Now, why that is important is down to kind of how we deal with it. Ev's agreeing with us in the background. So, do you want to talk us through kind of like how we deal with that?
Yeah, well, there's more than one way to cut the cake, isn't there? So I guess first of all, once we've kind of decided that you maybe want to do something about a said leg length difference, whether it's structural or functional.
Oh, and why we want to deal with the leg length difference is because obviously we're riding a symmetrical bike and we want to make essentially try and get your biomechanics as symmetrical.
We want to strive for perfect symmetry, knowing that we'll never get there.
Yeah. So, you know, if you've got a shorter leg and you're kind of having to reach further on one side than the other, then, you know, there's stuff we can do to like kind of effectively make both legs feel more even.
So I guess the most obvious thing would be leg length shims.
Yep.
Clues in the name. And
what are these said shims?
These are essentially little bits of plastic that rest between your cleat and the sole of your shoe to make effectively your shorter leg longer.
Mm-hmm.
And that is, for most people, usually the way to go.
Yeah.
Now, they are available for multiple different types of pedal systems. So regardless of whether, well, look at Shimano, Speedplay, all good. They are available for mountain bike systems, but they are less versatile. So depending on the severity, it's probably not the right word to use, or
it was just showing off his mountain bike shim there.
But depending on the severity of the leg difference and how much needs to be accommodated for, you might run out of possibilities with shimming mountain bike cleats.
Yeah, I mean, actually, Form's just brought out. I think Ronan's making kind of more options now. He's got. So normally they come in millimeter increments. So like a road bike cleat, leg length shim, come in 2 or 3 mil increments, and you can stack them on top of each other to, you know, you can go up to, you know, I think we've shimmed people over 20 mil
Yeah.
before. Mountain bike ones, because the interface is a little bit more complicated. So far, it's like 3 to 5 mil.
Yeah.
In the Form mountain bike shims. But yeah, Rodin's got some more kind of an extender plate which
Busy
can
bee,
kind
isn't he,
of
old Ronan?
add on to it. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it's because people realise it's an option now,
Yeah.
and you can shim stuff out. And he's had a few Olympic mountain bikers who've kind of used his shims and so on. So yeah.
Yeah. But I think shims are the first go-to if you decide you want to do something about a potential leg length difference.
Yeah.
The thing to remember is, as the higher the shim goes, the further back you might want to bring your cleat
Yeah.
to maintain stability on the pedal.
Yeah, so if you imagine just kind of, I don't know, yeah, stacking anything higher and higher and higher up, it becomes a little bit more unstable. There's more what we call rocking torque through the system because of that kind of added distance, and then the cleat is still interfacing in the same place, but the shoe is getting further away from that. So there are some kind of nuances of kind of how to position your cleats relative to kind of leg length shims, but usually something between kind of 3 and 6 mils of kind of shim stack will require minimal kind of adjustment in cleat placement. But yeah, again, if you're unsure, please consult your local bike fitter.
Or seek out someone who is au fait with this sort of stuff.
And I think things like leg length shims are probably most relevant for people with structural leg length differences.
Yeah.
You do have one bone longer than the other. You're trying to do a symmetrical sport, and therefore we need to try and make your function on the bike as symmetrical as possible. If it's causing kind of issues.
Yeah, and in terms of functional leg length difference, the preference would usually be, depending on the severity of the differential between each leg and how that leg functions, would be to work on rebalancing out
The body.
how the left and the right side function relative to each other. That's usually the preference. It's a longer term approach, but effectively you are just putting a crutch in to help, in inverted commas, with that functional difference. You're not solving the root cause of the problem. So it might be a short-term solution, but you're not going to get to the bottom of it unless you work on your functionality off the bike as well.
Yeah, essentially, if you've got a functional difference and you put in a shim to kind of correct, in air quotes, then you essentially lock in that asymmetry. You don't give the body a chance to rebalance itself. You're essentially accepting that there is an asymmetry there, and you want to kind of lock that in. And there may be circumstances where that is a good short-term solution, as you were saying. But as we were seeing with a fellow who came in this morning, he had what appeared to be a leg length difference. It was really just a twist in his hip. We did some stretches and mobility work and moved his hips around, and lo and behold, his kind of hips evened out. His leg length difference disappeared. And so, it would be a disservice to that rider to just jam in a leg length shim because, their hips were kind of appeared different. When really all he needed to do was just even out his body or get rid of some of the tightness in his body.
So sometimes you have to go deeper than your initial observation to get to the cause of why this is happening. And this is why a leg length difference is so difficult, because it does require a bit of digging. Or
trial and error as well. Like some riders we don't see that often or don't have the opportunity to kind of see that much. And sometimes if functional differences are very ingrained, then it takes a long time for that functional difference to be kind of rebalanced. Then yeah, maybe you do have to put a shim in, but with the explicit plan of like slowly reducing that shim to allow the body to get back to a more kind of like balanced place. And this is where, you know, continual kind of feedback from riders is really important, and we need to kind of progress kind of bike fit. And you know, sometimes yeah, functional differences are so ingrained that riders are in pain, and you just have to do the best that you can for that moment to get them to a place where they can still ride without pain, and then you can start to address the kind of functional asymmetries.
Yeah, so as with everything with your bike position and your bike fit, it's a process.
Yeah.
It's not a quick fix or an overnight, you know, slap a bit of plastic underneath your cleat and jobs are good.
Sorry, guys.
So realising that it is a process is, you know, an important thing.
And this is where it does get difficult, and like certain conversations can get difficult with different riders, particularly if people are looking for quick fix solutions. And it's just our style of bike fitting as well, that we very much want people to be in touch with their functionality and their bodies and how they work, so that they can manage their own kind of bike fit and so on. And, you know, we want to try and get to the root causes so that riders have longevity and that they can keep riding their bikes for many years to come, rather than just dealing with the here and now. And so this is a conversation and decision making that has to be made with the rider there and then. Just to, you know, we can't prescribe stuff just because, you know, and this is where we need riders' involvement and their understanding of what their bodies are doing to be able to make these kind of decisions. I know this might be difficult for people who don't have access to an experienced bike fitter and so on, but you know, see if you can consult someone at least and kind of have that discussion, and they might be able to offer some expertise and view on it. Like physios, I'm sure, are very used to it, and podiatrists as well. They just go through different solutions for different circumstances, like gait and so on.
Yeah, and your solution might be different to quote unquote the norm, you know.
Yeah.
So a leg length shim might not be what's required for you.
Yeah.
So you do have to think outside the box sometimes.
How do you feel about staggered cleats?
So I had this once. So I think it's, well, put my head on the block. I think it's a bit, depending on the circumstance, it's usually more of a lazy way of dealing with it.
Yeah.
So a lad I coach, or used to coach for triathlon, lives other side of the world in Singapore. He had a bike fit years ago and had always ridden with a 3mm shim under his left foot. He bought a time trial bike, went to get it fitted, and said bike fitter, don't know who it was, don't really care, doesn't matter, removed this shim and staggered the cleats to get the same angles on both sides of his body.
So staggered cleats being kind of moving one cleat slightly further forward.
Exactly, yeah.
And one cleat further back.
So the cleat on the quote unquote shorter leg went forward to effectively extend or make that leg longer, effectively. So effectively reduce the distance that leg had to cover to get to the bottom of the pedal stroke. So anyway, we go do a long ride at the weekend. And, well, I say a long ride, I told him not to, but he went and did a long ride anyway. Lo and behold, left knee pain.
Yeah.
And he was like, oh, in panic, I've got a race coming up. And I was like, well, what changed? He's like, well, cleats have been staggered and the shim got taken out. I was like, all right, put the shim back in, move the cleat back, go test it. Knee pain's gone.
Yeah.
So usually staggering the cleats is not a great way to do it, but it is a potential option and could be a way in specific circumstances.
Yeah.
So not what we'd probably want to try first, but that is one way to do it.
Yeah. I think the thing you need to remember with staggering cleats is that it's very difficult to account for just the full range of different things that will change. Essentially, you've got both legs pedaling in completely different circles now and operating in completely different ways because of that cleat. You know, the crank goes all the way 360 degrees around.
What we'll say though is there are certain instances where you probably might want to consider staggered cleats, but that's a different conversation on a different topic.
Yeah. So, yeah.
And we might talk about feet later, but that's a story for another day.
So for now, I would say try, if you're thinking of trying to correct for leg length difference, do it with a shim.
Yeah.
Rather than
your cleats. Yeah.
Or you can sometimes shim internally. So a shim at the moment is like kind of, we're talking about something that is external to the shoe that goes in between the shoe and the cleat. But if you've got enough room inside your shoe.
Well, we've done this before. Remember a couple of years ago, we had one chap on a time trial bike who was working with a podiatrist who was very proactive about his fit.
Yeah.
And we came up with a solution whereby it was a series of building up the inside of the shoe on his custom orthotic that helped correct for a minor leg length difference.
Yeah.
And we got him back in after him revisiting his podiatrist and got some Leomo on the go and beautiful.
All good.
So wild solution, but sometimes doing work inside the shoe, if it's a minor difference, and you've got room and volume inside the shoe to play with, can really kind of make a big difference there as well. Yeah.
I had just the thought of another kind of interesting bike fit I did quite a while ago, and this was really extreme.
I know where this is going.
I had a chap who, from birth, had significant asymmetries on one side to the other, and essentially one side of his body just had a lot of muscle wastage on one side, and so it just had lost a lot of range of motion on one side. So we actually ended up, the best solution was actually having a longer crank on one side and a shorter crank, a significantly shorter crank. I think we had a 170 on one side and a 130 on the other side, just to accommodate for that kind of loss of range of motion on his kind of, I think it was his right hand side, which meant his hips kind of stayed stable rather than before he came in, he was just wobbling all over the place.
Yeah.
So sometimes, depending on like the extremity of like the asymmetry of a body, you can go kind of crazy on the bike, change stuff out.
And it can change as well. It's like if you've had a significant trauma that's required some sort of metal work, then that can change your leg length, and it can go the other way as well. There's a very good friend of ours who are hoping to get on the podcast in October, who's coming over from warmer climes. That had a hip replacement. He's been wonky all his life, and then they sorted it out for him when they replaced his hip, and now none of his bikes fit. So it can go the other way as well. So it's the body's mad.
Yeah, but that is a really, really important point, and that quite often we'll put all these kind of shims and little interventions into your bike fit, and people get really attached to them. And I think you have to remember that even shims, especially as a functional difference that you're trying to resolve, they can be just temporary measures until bodies rebalance or like the bodies kind of function in a different way and so on. So nothing is forever. And if you're holding on to shims, but you're still getting a little bit of like discomfort, or some new discomfort has come on after years of using shims, then ask yourself that question: is it still relevant? Is it still doing the thing that it needs to do.
Yeah. Another interesting thing with leg length difference that we often see as well is crank length. So if your body is working right at and this is more to do with functional differences rather than structural, but if your body is working right at the limit of its capable range, then reducing some of that postural stress might actually be the solution, a good solution in terms of making your body function better and more evenly, left versus right.
Yeah, absolutely. So we were talking at the beginning about how correcting, quotes, for leg length difference is probably more relevant for those more extreme positions where you're putting your body under more postural stress. So you're bending forward a lot, you're kind of putting yourself into a really narrow aerodynamic position. So yeah, if you reduce some of that postural stress, if you open out the hips, if you lift your body position up, if you shorten the crank so that you don't have to turn such a big pedal circle, if you push your cleats back so you don't have to, you're not right on your tiptoes and pedaling such a big circle with your feet, all of that can add up to actually, a position that allows your body to function a lot more symmetrically, because you're not having to push the body to such an extreme. And so, you could, I've definitely seen riders who have come out of a more extreme position, come back into a more relaxed position, ride for a bit, work on their bodies, and then it means that they can go back into their kind of more extreme position again. So, everything ebbs and flows, and maybe you don't have to, air quotes again, correct for your leg length difference. It's just, listening to your body and putting it into a different position for a different time and space and goal and bike, maybe.
Give yourself a bigger window of movement options.
Yeah.
Basically. That's why I did my hip. Like, went from 170s to 160s.
Yeah.
Taller front end.
Yeah.
The shims came out of my leg, of my shoes.
Yeah.
And it's great. And not had a problem since.
Yeah. I don't know, you end up kind of like chasing the rabbit around, don't you?
You can do, yeah. You can do. But it's all contextual, and this is why exploring this in the wider context of your bike position is important as well, rather than just doing it in isolation.
Yeah. And just getting different opinions as well. Like, sometimes you can be your own worst enemy. Like just going down the rabbit hole and thinking this might be the best thing, but sometimes just a different perspective can do it. Whew. All right. That's quite a lot.
Rabbit hole there, didn't we?
Yeah. I think we're going to leave it there. Again, so if you think you've got a little bit of a leg length difference, think about it on the bike first, observe the differences, maybe take some video yourself. How does your different sides of your body function? How does it feel? See if you can figure out if it's a functional or structural difference, functional versus structural. And then decide how you want to go about it. If you want to, do some stretching if it's functional, and mobility and strength work to rebalance the body.
Which everyone should be doing, by the way.
Yeah, everyone should do that anyway.
Yeah, that's a non-negotiable.
Mobility and strength. We should definitely do a podcast on that.
We should do several.
Yeah. And if it is a structural difference, then, how would you go about doing it? Like exploring shims first is good. Try not to go with cleat stagger if you can. Explore maybe internal kind of shimming if there's enough room in your shoes, or one foot is kind of smaller than the other. And at an extreme, then, consider going down to different crank lengths, maybe, but that's pretty extreme. So again, best to consult your local bike fitter if possible. All right. Well, hopefully that's useful again, guys. Let us know your questions, thoughts, answers. Answers? Just thoughts.
Just thoughts.
Okay. And we'll see you in the next one. Ta-da!
suffering from numb hands, tingling toes, and any other persistent discomforts when you ride? These are all signs that your bike fit could be improved. If you're bike fit curious, get in touch with Wei or Matt by emailing info@foundation.fit or finding them on Instagram @FDN_bikefit. Finally, for all your bike servicing needs, custom dream bike or hand-built wheels, go to www.frequencycycleworks.com or find me on Instagram @frequencycycleworks. Until next time, keep on spinning.